Who doesn't want a plump rump? If you don't, this is not going to be the video for you. Whether you have a pancake butt and you don't want one, or you are blessed with a big behind and simply want to build more muscle mass, maybe shape it, or you're focused on performance and you simply enjoy the hip thrust, today's video is going to hopefully be a game changer for you. My name is Annie Miller, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and I help you learn as you train and enjoy your lifts again. And the body that the good Lord gave me was directly derived from the ruler family, just straight and flat as a board in all directions. Any shape that I have been able to create on my frame has been through building muscle. Today's video will not give you glutes overnight. That's called a BBL. The approach to hip thrust that I am going to share today should help you feel your glutes more, but you tell me once you try it at the end of the video. As I said, this is not an overnight transition. Building your glutes is like building any other muscle group. It will require time, intensity, and largely depends on your genetics as far as what shape the muscle is going to take on through training. This is about a 6-year gap that I'm showing you here from no glutes to what I would consider shaped glutes. Certainly not the largest, but still significant growth, and this came through performance goals. Aesthetics was not my focus and typically isn't, so don't be a troll. So before we get into how to upgrade your hip thrust, I do want to quickly review just a standard hip thrust setup. Regardless of what type of bench you're using, it should be at or below your knee. This particular bench looks accurate, but for my preference, it's a little bit high, so I would put something underneath my feet to slightly bring up my feet closer to the height of the bench. When setting up on the floor, the bench may actually be a little bit higher than you'll want it when you are doing the hip thrust, but generally speaking, you're gonna want the bench to be hitting at just above the band of your sports bra. As far as your foot position goes in terms of width, that's gonna be personal, so you can do whatever feels best for you. So in your top position, these things should be in place. Your eyes are going to be forward. Your shins are gonna be perpendicular to the ground. Your thighs should roughly be parallel to the floor. Getting after that full hip extension, we want to enter a slight posterior pelvic tilt. The hip thrust is a hip extension exercise. Your primary hip extensors are your glutes, specifically glute max, which is why the thrust tends to provide rounded glutes if trained properly with the right intensity and volume. Now, your secondary and third extensors are your hamstrings and your adductors or your inner thighs. So if you feel those working in addition to your glutes, that's okay. At the end of the video, I will let you know what to do if you are primarily feeling your hamstrings, your quads, or your adductors versus your glutes. Now, we're going to upgrade your hip thrust with these 4 small changes. So for these hip thrust upgrades, you're gonna need 3 different things. One of which is a bench that can decline in some way, shape, or form, or access to some kind of wedge specifically made for hip thrusting. You also need 2 wedges that are gonna go underneath your feet and some kind of mini band or glute band to go around your legs. As you can see, I've declined this bench. Most actual single unit hip thrust machines are built this way. You can also buy a hip thrust wedge, and that just ensures that your shoulders are going to be lower than or equal to the height of your knee, which is why I made that comment earlier about wanting the bench to be at or below your knee level. We want the shoulders below the knees because that ensures that we are not using our low back and that we're actually using our glutes. As far as the wedges being underneath your feet, this provides a slightly different force transfer, which I think you will feel if you give this a try. Play with your foot position as far as how wide your feet are and the foot angle turned slightly out or straight forward. Wherever you feel your glutes the most is the position that you're gonna wanna use. You can add the band around your knees as another option. This just adds a little bit of abduction, maybe some external rotation, which just adds more tension to glute max as well as your glute med and glute min. Once you have your setup with these new tactics in place, your actual hip thrust still should have those universal things that we talked about earlier. So the bench is going to be at or below your knee, ideally set up right above the strap of your sports bra, which is a lot easier to achieve with this declined position. Your eyes are going to be straight forward at the top and the bottom of the hip thrust. Your shin should be vertical or perpendicular to the floor, and your thighs should be parallel to the floor or close to. And then at the top of the hip thrust, we do want to enter just a slight posterior tilt to ensure that we are getting that full hip extension at the top. So it should look something like this. Before we get into some troubleshooting with thrusts, go ahead and like this video if it's been helpful so far. If you happen to be feeling your hip thrusts in your quads, I would guess that your feet are too far underneath you. Move your feet away a little bit and see if you feel more glute or hamstring with that change. Now, if you're feeling the opposite and you tend to feel it mostly in your hamstrings, then pull your feet underneath you just a tad. This is also where videoing yourself can be really helpful so that you can see if your shins are in fact vertical or if you need to move your feet further away or closer to you. If you happen to be feeling your hip thrust in your adductors, this is really common. Remember, your adductors are your inner thighs. They're kind of like your third string players when it comes to extending your hips. It could just be that your glutes are getting fatigued, so the adductors are coming in to help. It's okay to feel your adductors, but if you are primarily feeling them, I would play with your foot width and the angle in which your feet are at. I don't necessarily have a fix-all for this, but that is the area of the movement that I would suggest playing with to see if you can get into a position where you feel your glutes more. In addition to playing with the foot position, so the width and the angle that your feet are at, you might also play with putting that band around your thighs and just see if a little bit of abduction helps take away from the stress on the adductors. I hope you enjoyed those educated gains, and if you are currently hip thrusting, I would love to know how many days per week in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.